I'm Jasmine McGlure.
And I'm Mary Miller.
And we are both life coaches who have experienced sudden and devastating loss. We started a podcast called Mourning Glory because we wanted to have conversations that would bring hope and healing and encouragement and empowerment to those who are grieving from loss of a loved one or through death, through divorce, illness, you name it. Grief can take many different forms in our lives. So today we're going to do something a little bit different where we've each prepared questions for the other person. The other person does not know what the questions are, so we're going to have a very rough cut conversation. Impromptu conversation. We're going to see how this goes. So I'm going to ask my question to Mary first.
Okay.
Are you nervous?
What do you want to know?
Yeah. So like I said, we've experienced grief together. I lost my son, David, and then 6 months later, Mary lost her husband of 46 years. 46 years. So my question has to do with the change or the changes that took place after you lost your husband. What would you say was one of the biggest changes in your life after losing Dan?
Oh, you expect me to narrow that down to one?
One of the biggest, one of the most significant changes.
Probably, I would say the most significant change that changed in me was a deeper revelation that I have no control over anything in my life.
Yeah.
You know, that the only thing I can control is how I respond to it. But at the same time, over that journey, probably the first year or so, was really leaning into the surrender of a new level of trust in God, that everything is in His hands. So that's what I kept telling myself, it was like, God, you weren't surprised by this. I was. I was shocked because it was such a sudden death, but you weren't surprised by this. So probably the realization that I've learned how to let go of the little things, not stress the little things as much, because I can't control anything other than how I respond to it. So I've learned how to just really be a little bit more, I want to say, at ease with life in terms of, okay, God, you know what's going on. You're going to take care of it.
Yeah. I think that's a really big lesson. It's the most unfortunate lesson to learn. But one of the changes with learning that you don't have control, sounds like you learned also, like you said, use the word surrender. How to surrender to God. So it sounds like it had some really deep impact on your faith and your relationship with God simultaneously.
Yeah, and because basically I could say when you really learn how to, and through something like this, you learn really how to completely surrender. It's amazing how the peace that comes. I don't have to be in charge. I don't have to be in control. And, okay, you said, so I've turned it over to you. Okay, you said, and so I'm bringing your word back to you. And so it really has brought a level of peace to me in terms of I'm less stress. Believe it or not, it's become less stressful. Now, of course, the first year it was, actually first few years it's been 3.5 years. And that doesn't mean I still don't have bouts of the grief and the loss and, dealing with, all what they call secondary losses, that, all the things that he used to handle, all the things that, that now are on my shoulders. Doesn't mean I don't have to deal with those and, have to process through those, but just life in general, I'm just more at peace with.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Okay. I could ask 1,000 other questions that go with that, but I'll stop it there. So, all right, your turn to ask me now.
Okay. So the question that I have for you, Jasmine, when we have a sudden death, like both of us experienced, how do you handle day to day after that? How do you live? With your life, as somebody's just thrown a bomb in your life, how do you handle? You still had children at home. You still, after losing David, you still had 3 other children.
Yeah.
So, and a husband. And so, how do you manage that when you're in the throes of grief?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of my kids is right behind the camera. So, yeah. I think one of the hardest parts is when you are on that ride back home after the service is finished and you don't know what to do next. We didn't know, like, there was no show you could watch. There was no amount of ice cream. There was no family. You wanted to be together, but you didn't know how to be together. Because you knew everybody was feeling this deep space, but nobody knew the words to say it or even wanted to talk about it. So I think each day, I will say, in my case and situation, I know not everybody's is like this, but we had JP. JP is the youngest, and when David passed away, JP was about 6 months. And I think JP gave everybody something physical to show up for. He, at the time I was nursing, so he was like very demanding. You were going to be present. He was going to require you and command you to be present because you had to be there for him. And I think even for the siblings to have someone to dote on, to hug and kiss, somebody that knew nothing about what was going on and was just pure joy.
And he's definitely become the life of the party.
Oh my gosh. And he knows it, I think, and he knows it too. And so just watching him, and then JP brought and made, I think, all of us feel a sense of being present to some degree. There was definitely always a daily struggle, but somebody told me it was more just like the practical, drink your water, make your bed, go up and down the stairs, do your laundry. So it was very practical, very like hands-on and very physical. It was like, I didn't feel like there was life in me, even though my heart was still beating, but still having to make the grocery list. And there was also community, which was huge. Friends that would invite us for dinner, people constantly checking up on me. So I think that also reminded me I'm here with people, I'm loved, I'm not alone. And honestly, that experience made me want to be a better friend. It just made me want to show up different. And it made me realize that presence.
And probably for both of us as life coaches, we've probably dealt with people who were dealing with some form of grief before this, and both of us having a deep revelation. We didn't have a clue what those people were dealing with. So now we both have a deeper understanding, and sometimes just dealing with somebody with grief is just to be there, to listen, and we can't fix it. So we can't fix it.
That's the hardest part.
You can't fix it. And so like with you, in what I did for myself as a life coach, because first thing I said was like, okay, if I was coaching somebody, what would I tell them? It's like, well, you need support. So I started going to a support group, and I actually invited you.
Well, actually, the first one together.
I should say, I told you I was going. I said, I don't want to, but I'm going. And you were gracious, like, I'll go with you. So
go with your friends.
So, but I think, and I'll be honest, I think you got more out of that first one than I did, because it had only been like maybe a month since my husband passed, and I was just killed pretty shut down. But it really spoke to you, but I kept going. It was like, and the main thing that we talk about there is, and I now run a grief share group. And so you do the next thing. You just do the next thing. That's how you just do the next thing, you know, and allow people to help. And allow people to help.
And that might have been where I learned that from, was just doing the next thing. Exactly. Okay, and so much in that too.
But we could go on
So my next question, it has to do with the title of the conference that we're doing. So we're doing Mourning Glory, Life Doesn't End Here. And we went through a couple of, different ideas. I went through a couple of different ideas with that. But what does that mean to you, life doesn't end here? What is it through your mourning? How did you keep going? Not just in the function, but to feel like this isn't the end.
That's really difficult, especially when you've lost your spouse of a lot of years. So, we were married 46 years, we were together 50 years. And so I really literally felt like I lost my other half. It was like, what do you do when like I said, a bomb drops in your life and you lost your right arm and your right leg. And so you think about, in terms of ways you think about an amputee, it's like you learn how to live, but it doesn't happen overnight. You've got to learn how to deal with using my left arm now and my left leg, and how to deal with, not having that other half. But and I think that's a great kind of illustration in dealing with like an amputee, because then you're dealing with this phantom pain that, it's there. And it took me a few months to realize this pain that I was dealing with, it was just all-consuming, overwhelming. And it dawned on me the one day when I was little, I couldn't stay overnight because I always got homesick. I was always, and I realized I'm homesick, but and he's home, and I've lost home. So it was a huge transition of once I realized that, okay, now how do I move forward? And realize I've lost him physically, but he's still here with me, and he's still, and I still live in the same house, and a lot of it is still, reminiscent of him. And I realize, and this, which is so true, they say unless you absolutely have to, don't make a major decision the first year. And because you make decisions out of emotion, and then you look back, wish I hadn't done that. Wish I hadn't done that. So and I knew at that point I wasn't ready to, even though my husband and I were in the process of getting our house ready, and we were looking into transitioning to another state and selling our house and downsizing. But I realized now that, I'm so glad that I didn't. And because I realized that's going to be another huge loss. Because we've lived there for over 30 years. This is where I raised my kids, and so there's a lot of memories. So selling the house, even though I know at some point I'm going to, it's a loss. It's a real loss. But basically, I realized I needed to. I gave myself the first year of. I don't want to say I was isolated. I had wonderful friends, you included, but I had wonderful friends. I was either taken out for lunch or dinner, or somebody was coming over to my house. So I had wonderful friends, but I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't go to church for a year. I couldn't, because this is something my husband and I did, and I made the mistake the first time of going and sitting in the same place we always sat, and was like, oh, that's not good. Basically I cried through the whole service, and basically, no, not going to work. So I realized after the first year, basically, and I felt like God saying, what are you going to do? And so, and as a life coach, basically, and so that's when he laid it on my heart. So I started Grief Share. I went back to work as a life coach, but I started Grief Share and started pouring my life, into others who are, I know what it's like, so how can I help you? And so there's life in that, life goes on. He was my other half, but he didn't make me whole. God did.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think that's a mic drop.
Okay, Jazz, you ready for your second question?
Let's see. I hope.
Well, I'm going to make it kind of a twofold one. It's very similar to the question you asked me in terms of how has this changed you? But because you lost a child, my question is, how has this changed your marriage?
Well, you're getting deep. Okay.
How did it affect your marriage?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it. You had to work through some things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think so. I always say, I've heard somebody else say this, and I'm just borrowing the phrase, but that Matt and I've been married now going on to 19 years, and so I've been married to multiple versions of him, and he's been married to a variety of versions of me. But I'm thankful that each version is always better than the former.
Oh, good.
We just keep getting,
that's the whole
better.
Idea.
Right? Exactly. So I'm thankful for that, because I'm only one half of that equation. It will require him to also do some work as well in order for us to keep progressing. So I'm very thankful that he's always been open and willing to make changes so that we can grow together. Personally, I've changed so much, because when we lost David, my landscape for my faith shifted, just as much as what you were talking about before. So a lot of the subjects in my mind anyway were about how like the impact of this on my faith. So what does this mean about God? And what does that mean about God? And then what does that mean about me? So it's kind of like my internal structure of who God is shifting, which is simultaneously shifting my identity and how I see myself.
Yes.
But it was happening in both myself and my husband in very different ways and different timing. But we were able to have conversations about that.
Okay.
So that was, one way of things changing was spiritually, which is a strong foundation for us. In terms of our marriage, I would say it's gotten way deeper and richer. With losing a child, I've heard somebody say that, well, your marriage now has a greater percentage of divorce because of loss of a child.
That's what I've heard.
Right? And then I heard somebody else say, who also lost a child, that that percentage or that statistic was for people who don't have faith in God. Like it's for the non-believing community. But for the believing community, it's actually that they can tend to hold together much stronger. I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know the sources. Don't quote me on it. You can look it up yourself. But I found that to be true for Matt and I, because one of the things that we set out to do at the outset, it wasn't even spoken, was we will not blame each other.
Okay.
So I was not looking at him like I'm going to take my anger out on you because you've done X, Y, and Z, or even vice versa. Right. It was an understanding that we both love this child the exact same way. We both wanted the best. We have different parenting styles, but that didn't negate from the love that we, share for our kids. So at the outset, it was, I'm not going to take a jab at you. I think second to that was honoring each other's grief and the expression of that. We did not see eye to eye on how to grieve. I wanted to, I'm a very, as you can see, like just by doing this, it was like, I want to help other people with it. And he was just like, I don't want to put anything out there or, so.
Very private.
Yeah, very private, which was fine. So then how do I honor him, but honor myself in the way I want to process? So we had very different ways of doing that, but giving space. And so our marriage counselor, actually just our counselor, our therapist, he was very instrumental in helping us to articulate and interpret each other so that we weren't taking it as an attack on the other person, but he was helpful in interpreting, like, so what Jazz is saying or what Matt is saying.
Good.
So that was helpful.
My question is, did you start having counseling for you, the two of you, after David, or were you already seeing a counselor before?
Yeah, we've had spurts of seeing a counselor before David, but I knew that I was going to need it and my whole family was going to need it. So I reached out to a friend who had been seeing a counselor for a number of years. And so right after David's service, I want to say it was like that following week, the whole family, we all went. And then as the kids seemed like they were doing okay or found relatively okay, but maybe just not wanting to speak to this particular person, then it just fell to me and Matt. And then Matt and I, then it was individual and sometimes together and things like that. So he really helped us to work through some really difficult, very difficult spots that I think could have probably ended up as a statistic had we not had some wise counsel. So
you would say that it's vitally important to get some type of counsel or a life coach or somebody to help you walk through your
100%. Because you think you're the thing, whatever you were struggling with before the trauma or before the grief, or you combine those things as trauma and grief, whatever you were dealing with before then, it is on fire times 100 after that. Yes, it's much bigger, and your emotions are so visceral, and it's right there on the surface. So, if I was a quiet little mouse before, I'm not now, So I became.
But just so you know, wasn't a quiet mouse before.
No, no. So, but just being more vocal about things. So it was just like you could scratch the surface and feelings were right there. So we needed help with how to be more delicate with each other. Like, so this is what this is for you, and how do I hold your heart? Right. And he would hold my heart, and I would hold his to the best of my ability. And one of the examples of that was he wasn't like, I'm still homeschooling, still home with the kids, still trying to manage being a wife, mom. And this one day my brain was just not clicking on, And, you know, because grief does that. Your brain just it's like it's not firing.
Absolutely.
And had a hard day just trying to get structure back into the home and all the changes because we had moved at the same time.
Yes.
So I was having a hard day and I called my husband and I said, I don't feel like doing whatever it was. I was like, I'm having a hard time. And he says, you sound like you need a break. And I was like, I do. And he said, you know what? Screw the day. Go to Hobby Lobby, buy yourself something. He was like, spend up to $100. I was like, oh my gosh, I love this man. And it wasn't the spending the money. It was that he relieved me.
He gave you permission to just,
just feel it. Yep. And I think that's the thing that we've actually been able to do for each other is we just give each other permission to feel it. I'm not going to correct you. I'm not going to try to Jesus you up and down. I'm not going to say, oh, that doesn't line up with scripture.
Right.
I'm not going to, but where's the, the man, none of that. I'm not going to hold you to any of these standards. I'm going to just let you be and I'm going to sit with you in it. So I think we just learned how to be really good friends.
Right.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest gift out of this has been we've learned how to be each other's friend.
Yeah. I would, based on what you were just saying, that was one of the things that I hear from a lot of people is, like I said, I started Grief Share, and people are like, why would I want to come to a group and just listen to other people, their stuff? And a lot of people, really don't know how to handle grief.
Right.
And a lot of people don't want to feel it. So they stuff it. And so that's where you can get into trouble with, drugs, alcohol, other addictions, anything to mask this. But we need to remember that there's a difference between grief and mourning. And grief is what we feel. And mourning is actually the emoting, the crying, the talking about it, getting it out. And we need to understand, even from a Christian perspective, that's actually honors God. It doesn't honor God by stuffing it and it's like, oh, I'm good. God's all I need. I'm good. No. And if you understand that, even go back in the days of Jesus, that's when they actually hired mourners. When there was something, there was a death or something in the family, people were hired mourners to come in and start crying and emoting to help the family release and get it out. And it's so much more, we need to get it out, and so would we bury it, it's going to come out, but it comes out sideways.
Yes, it's going to come out. It's going to come out in your health. It'll come out in your hair loss. It'll come out in the... And
even in relationships, you have a short fuse, at the time, which is understandable. But when you understand, like when your husband short fuse, it was like, I understand what's going on. Doesn't excuse or justify this type of stuff, but it was like, I understand. So how do I, like you said, I love that. Hold his heart in my hands. How do I hold that space for him?
I think it's interesting because, like you said, I have kids, so everybody manifested their grief differently. So me feeling like I'm at the center of that is how do I hold everybody with where they're at.
So on that note, did you feel responsible for them?
A great deal, especially at the outset, because and it was like yes and no. Because I had that epiphany, I have no control.
Yes.
And that bothered me because of the way that we lost David, the fear that spirit was kind of still lingering in the home somewhere. But then at the end of the day it was, well, what could I do? And was there anything I could do? So I was still grappling with the power of prayer, still grappling with, will God hear me? Would he even respond? And why pray? So as I'm still grappling with that, but still feeling like, well, I still need to at least, be available and hear them and let them know that I'm present. And I think, like what you said earlier, I chuckled about it because the hardest part is I don't have an answer. That's the hardest part.
Yes.
For me personally, and then for anybody walking through it. So I took note of Job's friends and was just like, okay, just show up.
Yes.
Just show up. I don't have to have the answer, because in fact, when I try to give an anscer, I'm gonna mess it up.
Yes, right.
Make it make matters
That's
worse.
right.
And I've still made matters worse and messed it up anyway.
Oh yes.
But I've tried.
But I love how you really, you've shared with me, as a lot of your processing came out in the form of your book. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, and my publisher is going to kill me for not having my book with me right now, because he's like, oh, you should always have your book with you. So yeah, I wrote the book, if he doesn't, more as a companion book for anybody dealing with grief or trauma, disappointment. And Mary was the one that you really showed me that grief is not just, life coaching. Because I was like, man, well, what's the point of being a life coach now? I feel like I'm a death coach. And you were the one that really said, well, death is a part of life. And that really revalidated, like, okay, so I'm still in the right vein here. But I wrote that book to get in the ditch with other people who are experiencing, all forms of grief. But what I wanted to get at was not just this surface level, oh, I'm crying, I'm sad, it hurts, but the nuances of thought that go through your mind. And I know there's probably thousands of other thoughts out there, but I was like, and as I'm writing it, I'm like, am I going to regret putting all of this out here later?
Well, grief, I don't know that there's anything more powerful than grief to bring this stuff out, these questions out. And what you were doing was really, it was a deconstruction of your faith and your thought life around faith and around God. And, because let's face it, we've all been taught a lot of things that it's not true.
Exactly.
And so, and from my experience, there is nothing greater to stir that pot and bring that stuff to the surface than grief.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the harder parts is all of it's hard, and so I probably keep saying that phrase, one of the hard parts, but to look at what is coming out of it and say, man, I'm thankful for this part. But I always wanted to be careful. Like, I'm not thankful that happened.
Yes.
I just thank God that he gave me this as a result, because it could have been worse. My husband, myself, my kids could have all chosen very unhealthy, coping mechanisms, ran to different sources. And it doesn't mean that we didn't have that temptation or rocked with some things in there. But ultimately, I'm thankful that through it, I feel like we have deeper connections with each other and a deeper connection with the Lord. So
I think I'm gonna end it here with one of the things that I tell all my grief share group, people who are walking through grief, I let them know, you will never be the same. After you've experienced this, you will never be the same. But hopefully you are becoming a better version of who you were created to be because of what you've walked through. And so and this is the thing, stop looking back and trying to get back to the way it was. You'll never go back. It's never going to be the same. But you're going to grow into a better version of who God created you to be.
Yeah, amen. Well, this was fun. Thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Jess.
Yep. Great.